Our timekeepers, Art and Greg here, are going to give each speaker a 30-second heads up warning. Please wrap up within your allotted time. We're not equipped to do real-time fact-checking tonight. But I assure you all that if anybody mentions anything about eating labradoodles or Yorkies in Rosedale, I'll be all over. This is a forum, it's not a debate. Candidates are to address the audience, not each other. We're going to have a nice, friendly conversation tonight. Because we don't have an elevated stage, we're going to ask each of you to stand up when it's your turn to speak. And we are pressed for time tonight, so we'll all try to stay quiet and keep our applause and cheering and any other outbursts to zero if possible. We're going to begin with an opening statement from each candidate, beginning with candidate Topa.
Oh, and it's 1 minute?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
There we go.
You can stand where you are. Probably best to stay where you are because it's a tight spot.
Bottom, on the bottom.
Got it, thank you. I'm Kathy Chobo. It is great to be here with you this evening, and I really appreciate all of you who took time to attend. I had the privilege of serving on the Austin City Council for 3 terms, including 4 of those years as Mayor Pro Tem. And as a council member, I ran an incredibly responsive office, and my commitment to you is that as mayor, I would continue to be responding to the community. I want to just take a minute and say it was really important to me to be here this evening. Some of you may know I have 2 daughters who I love and have really prioritized and make sure I never miss any of their performances if I can at all help it. And tonight is a big marching band night. It's AISD's Jamboree, and it's in conflict. And after talking about it with my daughter, I realized I really needed to be here with you all because I value this conversation. I am very anxious to talk with many of you afterward, if possible. And you know, I mention that in part because you do see a missing seat here. And I think it's important to point out that it's not just tonight, but this is the 5th neighborhood forum where one of our candidates in this race has not attended. I am running because I believe we need new leadership. We need a mayor who is accountable to the public, who is committed to working with the community on community-driven solutions, to be an environmental champion, to be a champion for working families. As a council member, I received an award from the Workers' Defense Coalition that I have always treasured, called the Champion for Working Families. I worked hard as a council member to lead on big initiatives like the Sobering Center, Resilience Hubs, the Water Forward 100-Year Conservation Plan. We need a mayor who's a champion. We need somebody who's going to really work with Austin's families on quality of life issues, and I commit to you that I will be that mayor if elected. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Candidate Greco, and timekeepers, let us know when you're ready to go.
Hey folks, I'm Doug Greco. I'm running for mayor because I think our city needs a leader who stands for all Austinites, not big money, not big donors, and certainly not Governor Abbott. I moved to Austin in the late 90s, mid 90s, and taught high school on the east side at Johnston High School. It's now East Side Early College High for 5 years. And that's where I got involved in community organizing. First as a member of Education Austin, the teachers union, and then with an organization called Austin Interfaith, now Central Texas Interfaith. It's a faith and labor coalition that works on mostly economic justice issues. I led that organization for 12 years. During that time, we won hundreds of millions of dollars in local and state investments in workforce development, living wage jobs, infrastructure, affordable housing, housing for those experiencing homelessness. In 2021, as part of our statewide coalition and working with statewide union coalitions, I was at the center of the organizing effort to kill Chapter 313. It was the state's largest corporate tax giveaway program. It took $1 billion in potential school funding every year and gave it mostly to wealthy multinational oil and gas companies. And they tried to bring it back, and Governor Abbott tried to bring it back, and we beat them again and forced a major reform, and the program today is much more accountable to the environment and communities. I was also Chief of Staff for State Rep Gina Hinojosa, and I also worked in the LGBT movement with the largest statewide LGBT civil rights organization in the country, running as an openly gay candidate to be our first openly LGBTQ mayor. I'm running primarily on 2 reasons. Our affordability crisis is driving working families out of the city and out of the middle class. We're the fastest growing city for millionaires, and our income inequality continues to increase. And number 2, we need a mayor that's willing to stand up to the governor and state leaders when our local decisions, our education funding, and our civil rights are under attack. I will work with state leaders, but I won't work for them. Thank you, and I look forward to the forum.
Candidate Bone, you're next.
I was just trying to do the nice thing of ladies first there, so.
We'll just keep going across.
Welcome. We appreciate y'all showing up tonight. This is a pretty good crowd. My name's Jeffrey Bowen. We moved back to Texas in 1989 I was stationed in Utah at the time. We are from Texas originally. I had a job at Bergstrom. That is where the airport is now, for those that are not familiar with that, teaching leadership and management. Also, one of my jobs while I was in the Air Force was I was a construction manager for them. So my background kind of spans a lot of different areas. Again, my wife is here with me tonight. We've been here 35 years. Hard to believe how time flies. So one of the other things is I've been very involved in my community. When I first started, after I retired from the Air Force, one of the first things I started getting involved with was Habitat for Humanities, to where I wrote their curriculum and taught their homeowners maintenance program. From there, I ended up I've been at A&C for about 10 years. I'm currently a Board of Adjustments member, been there roughly a year. And I also own my own small construction business, doing a lot of renovations, remodels, and also some project management for people. So it's good to see you all tonight. Hopefully we'll have some good conversations, and let's see where this leads us. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Candidate Llanes Pulido.
Good evening. I'm Carmen Llanes Pulido, and I'm running to be your next mayor. I was born and raised here in Austin, just a block east of Clarksville, just west of downtown, and I grew up on both sides of I-35 in an incredibly diverse and creative community of Austinites. I went to all AISD schools, attended magnet schools, which gave me the opportunity to learn about neighborhoods all over our city, and I was privy to a lot of lessons of how things go well in growth and how they don't go so well, about what is gained as we grow and what needs to be protected and stewarded, if not lost, including the culture and the vibrance and the local businesses that make this a place that people really love. I went away to school at the University of Chicago. I got an interdisciplinary degree in environmental sciences and macroeconomics, and I came back and I've spent the past 20 years as a community organizer in various nonprofits and coalition efforts all over this city related to equitable infrastructure and quality of life, civic and voter engagement and mobilization, various social justice issues, a lot of those things that come back to our municipal government, the things that don't necessarily cut across party lines and don't fit into one box, but really have to do with what does it take to grow in a responsible way and steward our investments and build for the future. One of the nonprofits I worked with was Marathon Kids for many years, and through that work, and also with Poder in East Austin, as well as Go Austin, Vamos Austin, GABA, the nonprofit that I've run the last 10 plus years, I've gotten to work with over 25 different elementary schools and middle schools and the surrounding communities and neighborhoods. I am the candidate who will change the conversation, who will not lead with special interests, but with public interest, and in doing so, bring people together, east, south, north and west, central and outer, the people who haven't felt heard and the people who want to come back in or join anew. I have a track record of creating hundreds of new units of affordable housing in my own neighborhood, in my family's neighborhood, and fighting for the critical infrastructure investments that we need. I would love to earn your support, and I look forward to the conversation.
Good start, everybody. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to... All right, now we're going to go to lightning round. We won't need timers. We're just going to keep your answers super brief, 3 to 10 words tops. We're going to start with candidate Tovo and work our way across here. First question, what neighborhood do you live in? Are you a member of your neighborhood association, and if so, for how long? We're hosted tonight by 2 neighborhood associations. That seems like a good start.
I live in the Heritage Neighborhood Association. I am a member. I've been a member since I moved into that neighborhood in 2009. Prior to that, I lived in the Bouldin Creek neighborhood, and in addition to being a member of the neighborhood association, I also was president, and before that, secretary and newsletter deliverer. So long history with neighborhood associations.
I live in West Creek. Yes, I am a member for the 3 years that I've lived there. Moved there 3 years ago from the northeast side of Austin. So I'm a proud member of West Creek.
35 years in Maple Run, which is southwest Austin, right off of Brody Lane. Yes, I am a member. I'm also the ANC rep for my neighborhood.
I live in Dellwood too. It's just east of 35, southwest of Mueller, north of Airport Boulevard. I am a member of my neighborhood association. I've been living there since about 2008. And I was sort of born into the Austin Neighborhoods Council. A lot of the neighborhoods that met each other during 1984 in the last code rewrite. I was a baby on backpack, so it's close to me.
Good job, everybody. Thank you. All right, second lightning round question. Did you testify at council about the home, or participate in discussion at council about the Home 1 or Home 2 initiatives, or participate in any press events regarding it? And we'll do this by show of hands. Did you participate in the discussion or testify about Home 1 or Home 2 at City Hall? Hands up if you did. And if you did, those who were in support of Home 1 and Home 2, raise your hands. And opposed? Hands up. Okay, thank you. We're making everybody use all their body parts tonight. Okay, this one also, sorry? Oh, okay. So let's go back through that. I didn't anticipate that. So maybe we have to stand instead of a show of hands. So if you testified at council about the Home 1 or Home 2 initiatives, or participated in a press event about it, please rise. Or, sure, okay. And then if you were in support of it, raise your hand. Or if you're opposed to it, raise your hand. Okay. We'll get the bugs worked out here. Okay. A statement. So candidates over here both put out statements in opposition or support. And
I put out a statement to my priorities. I wasn't against updating the land use code. I was for updating land use code, but I put out a statement of how I would have done it.
okay. All right. And now we won't do show of hands. Rise if you support the reduction of compatibility standards, which allow 90-foot tall buildings adjacent to single-family homes. So the changes to the city's compatibility standards. I don't see anybody up.
Can I?
How fast? Okay, 10 words or less.
I'm against blanket zoning to eliminate compatibility. There could be some cases individually where it could be planned. So,
And now we're going to pass the mic. Anybody else has 7 words or less to qualify? Anybody?
Yeah, I thought it made sense to look at context-specific examples where compatibility could be adjusted and lowered. I think the council went way too far in passing what they did, and it has, no sense of context throughout the city.
Just for clarity, I'll say was open to the updates to the code with strong measures against displacement.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Okay. And not in neighborhoods. That was my deal, not in neighborhoods.
Okay, and an easier one. This is really easy. And I guess you'll have to stand, and this will be the last time we do this. If you end up in a December runoff election, would you commit to participating in a runoff forum for these groups? Everybody's up. Wave to the crowd. Okay, now timers. We're going to go to the 2-minute question. This is a longer question. There will be no standing or raising hands or anything. Just grab the microphone and stand up to answer. We're going to start over here with candidate Tobo. On land use, the city of Austin has recently passed a series of major zoning changes known as home, reducing lot sizes and increasing the number of dwellings that can be built on one lot. For residents, do you see any financial benefit or harm in the home ordinances? Would you have voted, or did you, for Home 1 and Home 2, and why or why not? As the home process continues, would you support increased impervious cover in residential areas to increase residential density? 2 minutes.
Thanks very much, and I may need you to remind me of some of those parts. I did not serve on council during this period of time. I would not have supported Home 1 or Home 2, and though I did not testify before council, I did provide information to multiple people who were involved in that process, including community members who were down there, planning commissioners, and had some conversations with council members as well. I believe that we need to really work. I think there are several issues with regard to the home provisions. And there was a specific question about impervious cover. I think the impervious cover should not be increased on residential tracts. I think the provisions that passed under Home 1 and 2 are going to incentivize the redevelopment of lots of tracts and bring increased development onto those tracts of land, and with no provisions, really no significant provisions for how to prevent flooding, for how to protect against wildfire. There were, all of these issues, if you watch those conversations, all of those issues came up during the council conversations, were raised by community members and were not mitigated in any way by what the council passed, with the exception of, their willingness to take a look at it with regard to Home 2 and maybe put some additional provisions in place. If elected, the first thing I would ask my colleagues to consider is a real ban on short-term rentals in Home 1. As many of you know, if you're building 3 units under Home 1, you can have all 3 of those operate, 2 of them 100% of the time as short-term rentals. That certainly is not going to benefit folks who want to rent or buy those units. I had proposed as a council member a loan for low-income, moderate-income folks to help them build accessory dwelling units. I think that's the kind of thoughtful planning that does allow property owners to stay in their homes, to potentially benefit, and also to grow, to add density in a way that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Again, what passed by council has a lot of flaws, and some of those can be corrected.
So I will say, yes, I was in support of updating the land use code. I would have fought for stronger anti-displacement measures. And to kind of explain my answer a bit, I didn't talk about where I grew up. I grew up in the eastern coal region of Pennsylvania. It was a proud area, tight-knit communities, but it was economically devastated. And my mom bought the house I grew up in for $30,000 and sold it in 2008 for $15,000. That's how much the value had gone down. And that drove for most of my life, fighting for affordable housing, fighting for mortgage and rental assistance, fighting for housing for those experiencing homelessness. 80% of MFI and below, with a focus on 50% and 30% and below. But I did think we needed to update the land use code. I think that this is part of creating more housing at different levels of income. I've worked on the east side and lived on the east side most of my adult life in Austin, and have fought for families to be able to stay in their homes, to earn a living wage. But I did think that we need more housing options at all levels of income. Impervious cover, I would fight to limit that. Would I say absolutely? I'd have to look at the specific proposal if it comes before council. But I have a strong environmental record and would fight to limit that.
When it comes to home, I was against it, primarily because I believe in property rights. I've even, last special session, I actually spoke at the committee for land use regarding our property rights. So there was the issues when it comes down to Home 1 and Home 2. The problem I had with the entire process was the lack of information being provided to all of you. If you want to build an ADU in your backyard, and that's what you want to do, I say it's your property. You should be able to do it within the realms of what the code calls for. But you also need to understand what are the unintentional consequences, which many of us talked to the council about, such as, what is the cost of permits? What is the cost of impact fees? How much is it gonna cost you to build this? How's it going to affect your actual property taxes? Because if you built another unit, depending upon what you were going to do with it, if you were gonna rent it out, you would end up losing your homestead exemption on the entire property. Only part of it, your homestead would have stayed with the piece that you were actually living in, which would impact your taxes. The other portion of it was, what about the insurance? What were you going to have to do now if you were going to be renting that unit out? Liability insurance, so on and so forth. But one of my main concerns was fire. How was the fire department going to be able to get to you or your property? We have a severe infrastructure issue, which was never addressed. And you have to remember, they started out saying, oh, we're going to make this affordable, and they pulled that out to where that was not part of it. So my entire concerns on this was the lack of transparency and clarity from this council.
So I also was very, very active in the hearings and the testimony and the activity around Home 1 and 2. December 7th is my birthday, and I spent, I think, 17 hours at City Hall with a huge coalition of people, and I came back on May 16th. And in between that, I can say, in that large coalition, which included homeowners, many middle and low-income homeowners, renters, unhoused and formerly unhoused individuals, organizations who serve them day to day. It was a very diverse coalition that was criticizing this approach to changing the land development code. And I was not only there vocal in lifting those voices, but also supporting people to understand what was actually happening, because there was a tremendous amount of misinformation. And as someone who served 4 years on the Planning Commission and did participate in much of the advocacy around much needed updates to our land development code, because I don't think anybody here thinks we shouldn't update it, I have repeatedly stood for the public interests of affordability, true affordability, not losing our affordability and creating deep affordability, our infrastructure, our environment, our quality of life. And these were all things that were spun often. A perfect example is here in Brentwood. An $800,000 single family home was purchased, torn down by an infill developer, subdivided, home and ADU on each side, sold the property with 4 units for $4 million. Each lot a fourth of what that original one is. Now, you could blame that maybe $50,000 on permitting fees, etc., right? Maybe even per house, but you can see what was happening. There are so many alternatives. I helped write an equity overlay that could have given us, along with the resolution, to create more flexible funding for ADUs, to allow things like manufactured housing, to really help people add the gentle density with responsible infrastructure that does not displace people in lower income brackets and middle income brackets. It would be better for all of us. Thank you.
All right, we made it through that round nicely. Question number 2, and we'll start with candidate Greco. The proposed, and this will be a 1-minute response, everybody. The proposed equitable transit-oriented development, or ETOD, areas around Capital Metro Light Rail would rezone nearly 1/3 of the Brentwood and Crestview area to allow building heights of up to 120 feet. Do you support upzoning 1 mile in diameter around the Cap Metro Light Rail, or only in nodes around stops, and why? 1 minute, sorry.
I would say, in general, I support the updates. I am absolutely against displacing anybody, if at all possible, and I don't agree with the idea that you redevelop, knock down an apartment complex, build a new one, and, you know, if those people move somewhere else, okay, we're just building more apartments at least. I think those folks have the first right of living there and should be guaranteed a place to live. Shouldn't have to give up their place to live. So in general, but again, with strong anti-displacement measures.
Candidate Bowen?
There we go, how's that? Okay. I was actually against the ETODs when they first came out, only because we weren't getting a lot of the information that was being talked about. Then the councils come out and said, oh, we're gonna now push this out First it was strictly supposed to be around the major stops, and then they've changed it. If a neighborhood plan is affected by that, I am totally against that. There's not a lot of common sense when it goes into this entire ETOP process, because now they're wanting to go farther and farther away from it. And you have to remember, they were dealing with, what was that distance? And some of those distances are not still correct within that 1 mile. Thank you.
This is another one where we need to learn from history. So 120 feet is a lot higher, but if you think of the Saltillo Plaza, there was a similar proposal to densify and have more transit-oriented development there. And ridership actually went down in that area because so many transit riders were displaced from the area. There was actually a provision suggested by our very developer-friendly planning commission to disincentivize the demolition of existing affordable multifamily apartments along that transit line. And one of the council members struck it. So this is why we opposed these initiatives and wanted something better, because unfortunately, just like the flooding thing, you know, they'll say impervious cover limits aren't changing, but then they say they're gonna exempt 3 new driveways. Well, just because you count it doesn't mean it's not there. And so when you see that implementation and you see that our actual transit users along the corridor are going to be displaced, that doesn't make us very appealing for federal transit money either. There was actually a recipe in the grant that we could have followed in a more equitable way. And so once the vote comes down, you either say, yes, we're okay with displacing all the transit riders, yes, we're okay with people flooding each other and having to sue in court, outside, create all these problems, or we want something better. And that's what those of us who opposed were actually doing to provide suggestions for something much better. Also, a mile is way too long. A safe distance is really a quarter mile in Austin with this kind of heat and our kind of weather. A mile is far too large for a watershed.
All right, now back to candidate Toto. 1 minute.
So during the period of time I served on Austin on the council, we had Code Next that came before council. And as I look around, many of you were involved in that. And so you may remember that I was one of the small group of council members that were really pushing back on those transition zones. And this in many ways, the ETOP in many ways is kind of a new version of transition zones. I thought it cut way into the neighborhoods. You know, density on the corridors is something that our comprehensive plan supported. It's something that most neighborhoods plans support. But going into the neighborhoods is really out of keeping with most neighborhood plans that have been adopted and approved. We also need to do, we can have a conversation here about whether those measures would have been good with more anti-displacement. But the fact is, they didn't have those measures in place. What the council passed did not provide any kind of thoughtful strategies for how to keep folks who are living in those areas in their homes. And so, we need a council, we need a mayor who's really committed to having and facilitating broader conversations at council that really take into account how things have developed in this city before. And I would offer the Riverside Corridor as one example of pretty good intentions, but really failed results in terms of helping longtime residents stay in that neighborhood.
All right, moving on to our next question. We'll start, this is going to be a 1-minute response also. Starting with candidate Bowen. On transportation, Capital Metro's Project Connect planned rail lines have been greatly shortened, but the cost has remained the same as for the initial plan. Do you support the reduced transit plan without funding being reduced? 1 minute.
I actually represented Austin Neighborhoods Councils with their neighborhoods as Project Connect ambassador. So I sat through the process for the 2 years prior to the vote. And as a construction guy watching and seeing, this is not going down the way it needs to be. I did not support the vote because it was not open and transparent. Right now, we've gone from less than 30 miles to less than 10. And I can't support that when they're still working with, and all of it's going to be, it's not even equitable. There's portions of it that they can still be doing right now with buses and making sure that we're getting ridership with the ride programs and even looking at options where it's an on-demand type service. But this whole process to me has been nothing but about the contractors, the designers, and all of the engineers that have to be involved with this. This has been nothing but a big money issue for me.
You say I was an organizer working with areas south of Ben White on both sides of I-35, south of 71, and north of 290 on both sides of I-35, both sides of I-35, north and south. And when I first saw Project Connect as a 2015 rendition of citywide transit that would actually take, as the ballot language stated, essential workers from north to downtown, south to downtown, back and forth, all around, service along East Austin in the Green Line, right? Even though it was proposed, we were looking at something that was really appealing to relieving congestion and doing all those great things that are in the ballot language. Unfortunately, that is not how this has been carried out. Another selling point was the $300 million for anti-displacement over 20 years. We should have about 80 million of that by now. And we've seen 14 million sent out, and the majority of that is going to basically Band-Aid projects for people who have had to leave. Am I out of time?
Yeah.
Bummer. Okay. Well, I support the plan. I think we got to go back to not to the drawing board, but back to the promise with the voters to work out what are the immediate improvements we're going to make till we can get a better deal on rail.
I do continue to support Project Connect. It is, I really was sorry to see those numbers come back and hear that it's going to take a lot longer to build out the plan that we know we need, which is citywide, that serves the whole city. But I've watched several rail proposals come and go, and in that time, we still don't have a rail system here in Austin, and I believe that we need it, both for environmental reasons. If we can keep those fares low, it's going to be a really important savings for folks who are transit dependent, helping them get around the city. And we need to get folks out of their cars. And Project Connect is of course more than just the rail, it's also the investment in bus improvements, and frankly we need it. So as mayor, I would certainly make sure that the Austin Transit Partnership is doing what it needs to do to bring that project get as much value as we can over that investment. But I do support continuing with what the voters approved this project, and if the courts say it's okay to move forward, I think we should move forward.
I do support it. I would like to reduce costs, but I don't think that's going to happen in the short run. We are getting less than we were promised, but I think it is good for our quality of life, for the environment, and there's good working class blue collar jobs that come out of it. I do agree with Jeff that a large portion are for professional services, and I would like to see, I think it's 2.7 billion. I think that more of that should go towards the workers that are actually building the highways to make sure they get livable wages and benefits. But in general, I support it. I think we should expand bus service, and I think our bus drivers who after 25, 30 years earn less than $30 an hour, 75% of them can't afford to live in the city and live outside the city. We should make sure our bus drivers are taken care of, and we are able to fully staff those routes as we expand.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, moving on to our next question. This will be a 2-minute response. We're going to talk about public safety. We'll start with Carmen Llanes Pulido. The question is, Brentwood and Crestview have experienced increased graffiti, homeless encampments, break-ins, theft, attacks, and other public safety issues. How can the city and APD improve police visibility and response time in the area? How will you work to improve the city's relationship with APD?
I think there are a number of ways that we can holistically address public safety. And of all of the things that you mentioned, there are a number of interventions that can be deployed that are not necessarily a police officer responding to a 911 call. Some of those things absolutely are. There are moments that people are going to need the police to arrive immediately. If you're in a car accident and you need a police report, if you are in fear of a violent attack, there are people who would prefer not to call the police, but the reality is we need police to be able to respond to the most important 911 calls. That said, there are a tremendous number of 911 calls that do not require a police response, and we will see a proof of concept, hopefully, in some of the recent city investments. EMS, for example, having more crisis response. I've been learning through EMS responders themselves, EMTs, that A lot of their emergency calls are not actually they're non-medical emergencies. They don't actually require an ambulance. They require just immediate human assistance that with the right training, people can get what they need. I've heard concerns all across Austin, far west Austin, about the lack of prepared mental health response among our police officers. So it's the kind of response that we really need to work on. And it's important to remember too that Austin Police Department has a staffing issue, a retention issue, and a training issue. The funding issue is a little bit more complicated because the funding has been restored, but it's been moved in many ways that are very difficult to follow. And we also have we have seen a massive reduction in police just from retirements. I'm cautiously optimistic about our new police chief, who I had the privilege of being in a community panel with, who said all the right things. We shouldn't have had to sue to implement the Austin Police Oversight Act, but now that that's settled, I think we can begin to have more trust and improve the morale in police-community relations, and I bring a track record in that work.
So, this is something that I'm hearing from folks around the city, an increase in property crime, an increase in graffiti, and certainly everybody has the right to live safely within their community, and that's going to be a top priority of mine as mayor, as it was as a council member. I'm proud to have been on a council that made really important changes in public safety and broadening our understanding of public safety and making sure that we were investing in other kinds of programs. Crisis response, as was mentioned. Things like the Sobering Center, which I brought forward, which allows individuals to go to a place that will care for them rather than to jail or to the emergency room. And it frees up police time. And a lot of the interventions that we were able to initiate do that. Their intent is to free up police officers for the work that they are best equipped to do. We also created the Office of Violence Prevention. I co-sponsored that, and that has some really important interventions that are out community-based, working to prevent violence before it happens. We need to look at some really good solutions, what other cities are doing to prevent property crime and graffiti. Some cities have done some really effective work in creating some graffiti prevention programs that I think we can model here in Austin. I am also, committed to making sure that we work to get a multi-year contract for the police that includes the accountability that the voters have supported and the courts have now said needs to happen. And I think we can do that. I think that will go a long way to recruiting and retaining officers. As a council member, I worked to push forward some policy to provide an incentive for officers to live within the city of Austin. That work hasn't moved forward, unfortunately, under the current administration, but I think that would also be helpful in terms of recruiting. And we need to make sure that the Cadet Academy reforms that were initiated by the council I served on are moving forward. There are important ways to make sure that our community policing really reflects the values that Austinites have. As a council member, I served my entire time, 11 plus years, on the Austin Police Retirement Board, and so am well positioned to build those relationships that I think we need to really improve morale and strengthen that connection between the city council and our police force.
So I'll say three things, maybe four. And I'm excited about the new police chief and her experience in Cincinnati. Number one, we need a police contract. Officers need to be paid well for the work they do, all public safety officers, especially for the work they do. And that should be done separate from what should have been quick implementation of the Police Oversight Act that was resoundingly approved. I think those two things got, there were bargaining chips. And so I think we need a contract, and I do think recruitment is not just a function of money, but it's a function of culture, it's a function of how we recruit from all parts of the city and make sure the police force is representative. The race equity training that the cadets and the sworn officers and the civilian officers get with Dr. Joyce James, a national expert, is the best in the nation, but I think, frankly, I think we should do that with all city employees. I would have implemented the Police Oversight Act. The parts that were caught up in court would be litigated, and some have been litigated, and let that work itself out. I am a strong believer in community policing. I know that term is used a lot, but the kind of community policing I support is the kind we did with Central Texas Interfaith. It looked like 100 folks at Holy Cross Catholic Church on the east side a third African American, a third Hispanic, a third Anglo, 10 officers, and a few commanders, and the head of office police oversight in small groups, talking to each other, telling each other stories, developing relationships. I think if officers know their community and develop relationships with the community, we can prevent a lot of crime. And finally, I'm going to say, we also need to broaden our definition of community safety to include all the things we're talking about, but also the attacks from the state level on immigrants, on workers, on communities of color, of the LGBT community, and really look at public safety in the broadest sense.
Well, one of our main issues is our shortage. Is it really being addressed? And I really don't think so. I don't think that they're doing good exit surveys as to why officers are leaving prior to retirement, or even those that are retiring early. If we've all noticed how officers end up getting pulled from our neighborhoods to go deal with special functions here or there, without much consideration for those of us that are in the neighborhoods. Like you, about 2 years ago, my truck got broken into and most of my tools got stolen. It took them several days to even respond to just the 311 call that said I'd had a break-in. So, and recently, this last year, I got hit by a drunk driver at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Took the officers about 20 some odd minutes to show up. But a lot of it was due because we have a shortage. We need to really concentrate on why is that shortage? Why are officers not wanting to come here? Why are they not wanting to join the academy? And let's get down to the brass tacks of what's going on with that. That should help us in some of these issues where it's break-ins, graffiti, but also we need to look at the other portion of it being where's the other part of the enforcement? Are we then condoning somebody getting caught doing graffiti where they shouldn't be? Yes, there's places where they can go and paint to their heart's content, but that doesn't mean it's on somebody's fence or those issues. So there needs to be a concerted effort of listening to the neighborhoods, listening to the residents as to what their concerns are. I do remember when we had officers that were assigned to our neighborhoods in those areas. And I really liked that because we knew who that officer was. We don't know that now because we don't really know how many officers we're going to have that night for that shift.
Thank you. Okay, so we're doing pretty well for time here so far. Let's go to a 1 minute response on infrastructure. And we're going to start back with candidate Tobo. 1 minute response. What do you see as Austin's biggest infrastructure needs, especially in residential areas? How will you quantify infrastructure spending required to support redevelopment authorized in the home and ETOD initiatives?
Well, I mean, overall, I think water is our biggest infrastructure need to make sure that we have sufficient water for future generations. That's one of the reasons that community members asked me to bring forward the Water Forward 100-year conservation plan, and I think that's somewhat begun to move forward, but needs to move forward with greater urgency. Within neighborhoods, we also need more investment in sidewalks. And just to pick up on the water, just to go backwards and pick up on the water, we certainly need to invest in increased pipes and making sure that we're addressing the leaks in our pipe and our water infrastructure. But within our neighborhoods, as we see more and more folks moving into them, we definitely need safe passageway on sidewalks. We need our streets to work well. And those are, not things that the council stopped or paused or directed any additional funding to when they passed Home 1 and Home 2. And they are collecting some data. I think that should help inform where those first round of infrastructure improvements go. But again, we need a mayor and a council who are really going to think through those kinds of changes and the kind of dollars that are going to be necessary before they make big changes.
So a few things. Number one, streets and sidewalks. We've got to prioritize, absolutely. Others on this panel have mentioned this before at other forums, but the incredible amount of water we lose through deteriorated water infrastructure. We estimate that Texas needs $88 billion. There's $1 billion pot of money coming from the state to cities, but it's 88 times as much in terms of the need. We're gonna have a big reckoning. It looks like the expansion of 35 is probably going forward. The mayor negotiated that deal, but did not negotiate what the city is gonna be stuck with, almost $1 billion, about $800 million to pay for caps and stitches. And if we have a highway expansion, we need caps and stitches, but he stuck us with the bill. He should have negotiated with the state, a state senator, to make sure the state paid for that as well. I think we've been a stronger negotiator as mayor. In terms of the last part of the question, I mean, those making the changes should bear the brunt of that cost, and especially if it's institutional corporate investors making changes should pay for that infrastructure.
We were asked this question at the last forum under an environmental question, and I said water, because we cannot live here without water. We have 2 nice lakes that we're drawing from, but everybody else is putting a straw in there. The city of Austin's a little bit late behind, they're really behind the power curve when it comes to our new digital meters. That technology has been out there for many, many years. And yet the city decided to go take a low interest loan from the state in order to pay for all those meters. Until all the meters are online, there's no way for us really to know what our leakage rate is. Many of us know that there's water that's running down one of the creeks right now, and it's all coming from the water pipes that are broken. Our sidewalks, let's face it, they're really a joke. They're nothing but a safety hazard in many cases. The lack of sidewalks and the sidewalks that are in need of bad repair. You cannot walk on a sidewalk without tripping in this town.
I think I also mentioned in one of the previous forums the issue with our leaky pipes and water being one of the most pressing issues in the future. The other piece is, especially when it comes to ETOD and a lot of this new densifying of the central city, we really can't forego the opportunity to require on-site water reuse. We have the ability to plug into a purple pipe system. We have the ability to actually update our infrastructure as we go so that we have water in 20 years. We have a plan, a 100-year plan, but even having it in the next 20 without fixing these leaks, et cetera, is going to be a problem. How much time is that? 30? Okay, power is the other one. We missed an opportunity to distribute the load on our grids, to require solar batteries and other ways to fulfill community solar for renters and more. This is going to be critical because if we go dark in Austin, it's not hours or days, it's weeks. That is actually my #1 is critical infrastructure, and we have a state flood plan, massive federal funds coming in, but we need that community expertise to make sure it's going to the right places.
I'm looking at my clock. We just made it through a bunch of questions. We're at a good stopping point to make the switch over to our District 7 candidates.
Final statements.
Oh, right. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know why I'm sitting here and not. Starting with candidate Greco, we'll do final statement, 1 minute. And then
Thank you.
right on time.
Thank you having us here. I asked for you to check out my campaign at grecoforaustin.com, endorsed by the LGBTQ plus Victory Fund, Dolores Huerta Action Fund, and a host of local labor, political, and Democratic Party activists. The thing that I like to close with is saying we have a choice. In this election, we can be a people of faith or a people of faith. And don't necessarily mean religious faith, even though we're in a church. But if we're fated into a decision, then we think the guy who's running for his 8th election in 27 years, he knows best. Let's give him one more shot. Let's let him take care of these problems for us. He's got so much money. Or we can be a people of faith. Faith in democracy, faith in our agency as active citizens and our collective power, our collective voice to solve issues like affordability, to protect our civil rights, and to take the responsibility for shaping the future of Austin and the state. That's the kind of campaign I'll run, and that's the kind of mayor I'll be. Thank you.
For many of you, as I jumped in at the last day, only because I was not happy with what was going on. I was tired of the council not listening. I was tired of going to city councils And we were basically talking to ourselves. There was no reason, nobody up there was listening to us. What I'd like to bring back is being able to let you be back in charge. That's what this city is. It's without us, they wouldn't have a position. We need to make sure that your voice is heard and listened to. Because you're the people that matter. It doesn't matter what issues they've got going on up there. It's your issues out here that need to be focused on, and your voices. And that's one of the reasons I jumped in this entire race at the last minute.
I'm running to be your mayor, the mayor of a city that raised me, because I was asked by a diverse coalition of hundreds of people from all over this city to step into this role, to bring new community-driven, accountable leadership to Austin. And I'm calling on that community that has created and stewarded and fought for and cared for this city to get engaged. And that's what this campaign has really been about. We have young people, we have people who have been here their entire lives, fourth generation, and I'm the youngest candidate in this race, but in addition to 20 years of community organizing and 10 years on city boards and commissions, working on municipal issues, I've had a lifetime to learn from the very best and the most dedicated, like people here. Not just people who have been here, but new families, the service industry workers who make this city run. If it works for them, it's going to work for every middle income and even upper middle income homeowner, because that's the quality of life that Austin deserves. So I'm inviting you, there is a place for everybody in this campaign, and there will always be a place for community in my policy.
Thanks again so much for your time and your attention tonight. When I ran the first time for city council, my tagline was, for a city hall that listens. And that's exactly what we need right now. We need a mayor in that office who is going to listen to community, who is going to embed those ideas and work to collaborate with community members on policy. And we need a mayor who is going to put people first. And that is exactly the kind of council member I was. That's exactly the kind of mayor I'll be. I am really proud to have received the endorsement of the Austin Sierra Club and this week of Central Austin Democrats. And we're building an incredible campaign. It is not an easy race, as most of you can imagine, but I've had 3 really challenging ones before this one. 2 of them against incumbents. And so I invite you to learn more. I invite you to join us. We've got an incredible base of supporters citywide and about 160 people who have stepped up to volunteer, who are out there every weekend, block walking, putting up signs, doing other kinds of things. So thank you very much for your time and your attention, and respectfully ask for your vote.
That has us exactly at 7:30. Now everybody applause.